Standard Group, 100 years of bringing your world to you.
Welcome back to Weekend Express with me, Abubakar Abdullahi. Now let's get to politics. With the increase in registration of political parties in central Kenya, we ask, is there a crack on the mountain? And joining me to discuss that is Alex Manyasi, governance expert and a political analyst. Alex, many thanks for making time for us this morning. We were to have the governor, just to add on that note, that Governor Mwangi wa Iria was to come, but unfortunately he couldn't make time for us this morning. Alex, I want us to analyze a statement that the governor, in reference to Mwangi, said, a statement he said to the press on Tuesday, November 27th. He said, in reference to journalists who asked why he formed this party. This party, he said, informs a new dawn of revolutionary ideology and a new birth of hope for 6th January. Today marks onset on a progressive reset and emancipation, he said. It will be felt, he added, it will be shaking existing powers and upset both status quo and pretenders. As an analyst, this seems, and as a communication student myself, this seems as though he's making reference to a certain sense of a discontent within the Jubilee party. Is it?
I don't think so. From where I sit, that's why I was smiling when you're reading the statement, because the way I see it is they needed to craft something that looks like it makes it unique, it makes it different. It's a new dawn. It's supposed to be revolutionary. They had to do that. And actually, I would have been surprised if the governor had come. Why? Because
we actually invited him. He couldn't come.
Yes.
He of course, again, told us to invite the party, one of his aides, who as well didn't come. So go on.
Yeah, I'm saying I would have been surprised because currently, you know that they're supposed to be showing allegiance to the DP. Yes. And therefore, anything that comes out of the Mount Kenya region will be looked at from the lens of moving away from the DP and the support of the DP. We know that the DP will be running most likely 90% chance on Jubilee ticket unless, of course, something happens and that is taken away from him.
Fair enough. Yeah. Let's get to the last statement of this general statement. It says it will shake existing powers and upset both status quo and pretenders. Existing powers in reference to the power that is already existing, which is the Jubilee Party.
Yes, and that's what I'm making reference to, because they're trying to come up with something which will deviate from what is expected. What is expected at this point is, of course, to some extent he's right when he says that it will upset pretenders, because there are so many people in the Mount Kenya region who are not with the DP. But are claiming to be with the DP. The fact remains that there are so many people in that region who will definitely think otherwise when it comes to status quo as it is right now. They gave a promise to the DP to rally behind him in 2022. If he's a smart man, and if he's not, I will advise him to be, is that might not be obvious. And the formation of these parties is actually supposed to be a wake-up call, one, and secondly,
a wake-up call
for him. And secondly, it's supposed to be a preparation for 2022, in the sense that they're just trying to craft a roadmap that they will use. Historically, if you look at the history of this country and the politics of this country, people of Mount Kenya have literally and technically not voted for anyone else. So if they vote for William Ruto or they support William Ruto, it will be the first time. I'm saying that because even if you look at even Mwai Kibaki, at the time when he was voted almost by everyone, the people of Mount Kenya had rallied behind Uhuru Kenyatta at that time. So whichever way you look at it, depending on how you look at it, it still comes to one point.
Fair enough. Alex, the language that was used is often of interest to point out. In a lengthy statements as well. It's unfair that he's not here to defend what he said, but we are here to analyze it anyway. He said party would weed out oppression and overturn the status quo in the political sphere. The existing political sphere is Jubilee. That is largely under the flagship, of course, the president from central Kenya. What kind of a political sphere will it overturn, the registrations of these new parties?
Yeah, you know, there has also been a bit of disquiet in the Mount Kenya region, and you saw the MPs going to Naivasha to talk about...
we'll come to that, the
yes,
issue of marginalization.
Yes, and so that also points to the fact that the people of Mount Kenya have been feeling like they're in government, they feel like they want more, but at the same time, they are not sure whether in 2022 they should be supporting someone else or be fronting one of their own to actually run for the same seat.
Which begs the question,
yeah.
The formation of course, a new political party with the governor coming out to state his political stand, does this also draw to an extent that the governor or anyone from central Kenya could be having a political interest, and more so, presidential political interest in the 2022 general elections?
You know, the Mount Kenya region is not necessarily looking at only having a presidential candidate. If you look at even what they said in Naivasha, they were talking about their contribution to the economy. So for them, it's a stake for the community. So they could be having interests, but at the same time, they are looking at what is the easiest way to get the interest catered for. If you look at it from a political analysis standpoint, if William Ruto was to pick a running mate, picking a running mate from the central region or the Mount Kenya region seems very unlikely. Because
what makes it unlikely, yes, for Ruto to pick a running mate from central Kenya?
Very unlikely because that will almost be a losing team. In the sense that it will upset almost all other communities. You know, Kenyan politics is very tribal. So
fair enough. You talk
yes,
of tribe. Central Kenya alone,
yeah,
as per the voter registration of the 2017 elections, registered 2.9 million voters. In fact, the third after Rift Valley and Eastern.
So I want to look at it from tribe and not from region. And this is why. If you look at it from tribe, Mount Kenya from the numbers now is almost number 2. From number 1. I think Luyas are becoming number 1. The unfortunate bit is that Luyas will never be together. And therefore, Mount Kenya or the Kikuyus or the people from Central are still number 1. So if you look at it from that sense, they have a right, and you see when it comes to voting for them, they can decide to vote all of them, almost all of them in one basket. Unlike the Western region, which, for example, will vote in different baskets and therefore will never be a vocal point when it comes to if you look at numbers. So from that point, Mount Kenya region, rightfully so, and you see, they have been clever enough to bring in the Meru, to bring in the Embus, to bring in the Mberes.
And this is talking largely of the central
of
Kenya,
the region, yes.
Course.
Yeah, so the Mount Kenya region has succeeded, apart from their numbers, which are big, to bring in the Merus, Embus, Mberes, like I'm saying, to make it even a bigger voting bloc. And if you look at the patterns, they are not majorly interested in positions are important for them, but they only pick strategic positions because of the interests of the region.
Fair enough. You say Deputy President having a running mate from Mount Kenya region will be a failure. What other options does the Deputy President have in as far as 2022 elective politics is concerned?
That's an interesting question. The DP will have a very difficult time in picking a running mate. Of course, one of the options, which would be a bad option, will be picking a running mate from the central region.
What makes it a bad option? Understanding that Central as a bloc has 2.1 million voters registered.
You see, you can easily create a revolution which you didn't have an intention of creating. And in this way, you have Uhuru Kenyatta president and William Ruto deputy, and then you flip that in 2022 and have a William Ruto president and a Mount Kenya person deputy. That becomes a very bad idea because other regions will start imagining that you're monopolizing the presidential seat. So that is why I'm saying that would be a bad idea. But the only other options he has, and one of the options is, of course, quickly disappearing from him is the Nyanza region. The only other option, which might be an easy option, would be the Western region. And of course, I do not think that one of the options on his table is him being a running mate. I do not think that's an option.
Deputy President being a running mate again?
Yes, it's not an option.
And you made mention of Western Kenya,
yeah,
understanding that Musalia Mudavadi has already shown interest in as far as 2022 presidential position is concerned. Ford Kenya, you'll remember it will be messy, noisy, it will have casualties. Moses Wetangula saying safari yangu na yako imeisha. One portraying as though he also has presidential ambitions. What will it take Deputy President William Ruto to convince then Western Kenya, a region that has suffered a unity elusiveness for a very long time, to come together and support him?
He needs to work with the leaders that are today. How he does that, it's of course a lot of work. Making sure that he's speaking to Mudavadi, Wetangula, especially those two, to back him up. However, the easiest option that I see, even though he's opposed to the change of the constitution, the DP is in his interest. He will actually be the biggest winner in creating more seats for him to rally other communities behind him. Because you see, at this point, as it stands, if we don't change the constitution, then it will be a presidential candidate and a running mate. And you see, like I said, his options are very limited when it comes to looking at whether he can actually get someone from the Mount Kenya region would be a bad idea. And him getting someone from Nyanza is a possibility, but as long as he doesn't have the backing of Raila Odinga, then it's an elusive idea. From Western region, which is the only remaining region, then that is where he can try and salvage, get into the bandwagon, one of the leaders, and rally behind him.
So you say the only option will be to change the constitution?
Yes, for him.
Now,
yes.
What does changing the constitution in your own interpretation include?
So that includes, you know, he's campaigning against changing the constitution, and if you look at his lieutenants are saying that we are adding more baggage and adding numbers and creating positions for people. But the truth is that how will other communities feel like they are going to be in government if they are not part of a position that is in existence? For example, how do you pick, how does William Ruto, the DP of Kenya today, pick a running mate from Mount Kenya and tell Luyas, we will give you 3 seats? You know, it's impossible to convince anyone in that sense. So, and that's why even in the last election, the Jubilee administration was telling lawyers who are backing Raila Odinga that you're being promised things that don't exist, which was true. So he will run in the same trouble.
Raila
so
Odinga did not win the election, so
yes.
we don't know if what they were promised is true, to be fair to all sides.
Yeah.
We talked of central Kenya, and there's often the talk of a looming division within Jubilee ahead of 2022. Do you read that within the lines?
That will definitely happen, and this is where the division will come from. The division will come from those who will be insisting that it will be William Ruto, and those who, like Mwangi wa Iria, who will be saying that time is up. We are not backing someone for the sake of backing someone. There are already people in Mount Kenya who feel like they have not benefited as they should have from this regime so far. And that's why they're making noise. Of course, Uhuru Kenyatta told them to be more strategic in the way they approach things. And so those who will be feeling like they still need to earn their rightful share of the contribution to the economy, I was actually a bit surprised that they went that far to do the maths about how...
We'll come to the maths. I have them here. Let's talk of the Kikuyu Council of Elders, who on June 27th, 2018, said, and I quote, "As a council, we are very serious that he," making reference to Ruto, "has to pack with Uhuru. If Uhuru has to leave in 2022, the deputy too should follow suit." Of course, these elders gave a statement that was as well largely disputed by political class, saying that they are elders who are wasting their time or saying anything. But statements as such, are they representative of the populace of central Kenya, or is it just the Council of Elders who are making such statements?
You know, when you hear statements like those coming from Council of Elders, Council of Elders do not speak in vain. They don't just make statements for the sake of it. And anytime, by the way, when you hear statements like those coming from such quarters, it's just a confirmation that, one, they're testing the waters. Two, it's supposed to be a statement to status quo. So it's supposed to mean that they are saying, let no one imagine. And even Kabogo made another statement, and other people have made similar statements. Moses Kuria, who is MP of the president has made statements before. So we have seen statements being made before. And those statements have always been overshadowed with shouts of we are rallying behind the DP. But those statements mean a lot, and they're significant when it comes to thinking about what the Mount Kenya region is thinking in 2022. It's very significant. No one should wish them away. And the DP has also said before, when those calls were coming up, he said that nobody is saying that I will be given without having to work for it.
Yes.
It's true. Now, the working for it is what he needs to figure out, and I hope that he's actually doing that.
Fair enough. If the words of the Council of Kikuyu Elders come to fruition, in the event that Central Kenya says Uhuru's term is over, so is Ruto's 10 years over, what are the options that the Deputy President have? I know we talked of Western Kenya, which itself, the elusiveness of unity. Nyanza, what kind of persuasion will it take for Deputy President William Ruto to convince, be it Raila Odinga or even the population in Nyanza, to front him as a flag bearer for his, or even a newly formed coalition by then?
Yeah. So one of the things that if I was to advise the DP, he actually needs to change the way he does his politics. He needs to move away from being combative to being more persuasive. In this sense, he needs to be more appealing to the people who think. You know, there are so many people who are thinking that probably he's too aggressive, who think that probably once you have disagreed, then you have disagreed for life. There are so many people who think like that. So that is what he needs to run away from. And to do that, he needs to start by creating more boardroom discussions than platforms which come from political rallies. So bashing of the leaders or speaking against the leaders, you know, and talking against the leaders of those communities is actually speaking against those communities themselves. So that is what he needs to start thinking about doing. And specifically, he needs about 3 or so regions. The Rift itself, he needs to find a way of getting the MPs from Rift Valley to actually back him 100%.
Which is not the case now.
Which is not the case
I will
now.
come to that a little bit later. Of course,
Yeah.
KANU, the Independence Party, KANU as well,
Yes.
Chairman Gideon Moi, is eyeing the presidency come 2022. Central Kenya produced the country's first president, the country's 3rd president, the country's 4th president. Will it be possible for Central Kenya to again produce the country's 5th president and 4th from that region?
So
in 2022,
yes.
Specification on the limits of
So,
2022.
It may not be possible for Central Kenya to produce a president. That's a fact.
In 2022?
Yes. It may be very difficult. If they attempt to go that direction, they might lose. However, the best bet that the Central Kenya region has is actually to use the Rift Valley region in this way. And that is where problems of William Ruto begin. Because the people of Central Kenya might look into the Rift, and that look into the Rift might be towards Gideon Moi. So that is what I see the people from Central looking at. Because they'll be more comfortable there, they'll be more assured
comfortable
there.
on which side? KANU's side?
Yes, they'll be more comfortable there, they'll be more assured there. And so that is the likely scenario that we might see. Whichever the arrangement, for example, if the constitution was to change, then you will see the Gideon Moi being in that mix. You might see Musalia Mudavadi actually being that mix possibility. And therefore, if you think about the crafting of that, and Uhuru Kenyatta might also come back in a different capacity. That is very likely. On the other end, that is how William Ruto needs to be more innovative than he is right now, if he's not already, about how he thinks about the winning team and how he crafts his team for 2022. Truth be said, it's about numbers, and those numbers come from tribes. As we speak today, Kenya has not grown to a point where we can delineate ourselves from thinking about tribes. It's not possible.
Let's get to the question of marginalization. Of course, members of parliament, leaders, political leaders from Central Kenya met in, said that they believe the region has been marginalized. Is this something you also share?
Of course, that's not true. That's not true in this sense. Central Kenya has benefited a lot from a lot of things. Of course, there have been concerns about things like security. People from central Kenya for a long time have been affected by serious insecurity issues, including Nyeri, where President Kibaki came from. For the longest time ever, people of Nyeri lacked security, they lacked basic things. The coffee sector had problems. The coffee sector had problems, I mean coffee and tea. However, I think the marginalization that we're talking about is more of a national phenomenon than a central Kenya issue. Because if you look at how, for example, higher education, central Kenya, as at now, has the highest number of universities in this country and getting the highest allocation. So you see, those are indirect benefits that you do not have to see coming into a region directly.
They talked of contributing 60% to the GDP, I believe. Looking at the World Bank report on income per capita, 3 of the 7 counties in central Kenya are the richest 5 counties in the country. Kiambu is ranked the second richest, contributing 11.2% to the GDP. The numbers may not be what they said. Kiambu contributes 12.2%. And I understand and the rationale behind them saying, we contribute a lot, yet we receive few.
Yeah, so one of the things that they forget is that contribution comes out of the several fundamental things. It means there's no county that will make a contribution to the GDP without certain sectors of the economy actually doing well. It's not possible. So whether you're talking about the construction sector, whether you're talking about the agricultural sector, whether you're talking about the education sector, that contribution comes out of the fact that there are certain sectors of the economy that are working much better. Why are we not talking about Turkana contributing to the economy? Because there's nothing. Why are we not talking about...
Because with the new discovery of oil,
yes,
the figures are set to
might
change. Let's not say nothing.
As of now,
as
of now, there's not much. The tourism sector in the coast, for example, when you talk about contribution to the economy, the people of the coast region, for example, might dispute. If you talk about Western, almost all sectors have died, especially if the sugar subsector dies, then that might be the only cash crop that the people of Western have. That is now gone. So when they talk about contribution to the economy, they need to be sincere enough to also say that we're contributing much to the economy because there's something working in the central region. So you can't say that you're contributing a lot. Where do you get money to spend? You see, it's just like the way me and you sitting here. We can't say that I am the one who is buying most from your shop, and at the same time I'm saying I am the one who is the most broke among the people who don't even come to buy. It's not possible. So it means you have some source from which you're getting to actually make purchases that make you a contributor to that economy.
What I read between the lines of the statements they gave was our counties are representing the most when it comes to of course, what they give to the GDP, but that is not equated to what they receive. That was the point they said.
True, but it just depends on what they mean by receiving. You see,
receiving, of course, in terms of budgetary county allocation.
Yes, but you see, things like budgetary county allocations are things that are set by law, things that are set by the Commission for Revenue Allocation. So that's not a possibility for them. What they were talking about in terms of contribution is probably they want things like appointments in government to be commensurate to what their contribution is. They want things like if the president was to do away with debt in certain sectors, the coffee, tea, then they do away with debts in those sectors. They want national functions like roads, for example, Class A roads, done for them more. Level 5 hospitals, for example, and those are the things they're talking about. But you see, they need to also understand that as they look for demanding for more, they need to also think about other places which have been marginalized. For them, they're talking about being marginalized
yet contribute very few to the national GDP.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Hold on that thought. Alex, we are taking a short commercial break here on Weekend Express. When we come back from the break, we'll delve deeper into a post-President Uhuru Kenyatta's exit from the political scene. What will that look like in as far as Mount Kenya is concerned? We'll be back.